In today's story, Justice for Bailey, Rose Harper, a recently widowed woman, takes her cherished dog, Bailey, to a new vet for a simple checkup. But when Bailey's health declines mysteriously under the care of the respected doctor, Blake Adams, Rose senses something isn't right. With her son Daniel's help and the courage of a young clinic worker, Tina, Rose uncovers dark secrets that reveal a dangerous pattern at the clinic. Determined to seek justice for Bailey, Rose's journey leads her to a dramatic courtroom battle and ultimately leaves a legacy that changes her community forever. Will Rose's fight for Bailey expose the truth? And how far is she willing to go for justice? If you're ready for an inspiring story of courage and resilience, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Let's dive into Justice for Bailey. Rose Harper woke early each morning, a habit she'd kept through marriage, widowhood, and all the mundane days in between. Her ritual was simple but sacred. She'd pour a cup of hot tea, look out the kitchen window and think about her late husband, Samuel. But lately, there was something new in her morning, a reason to smile even when the weight of Samuel's absence pressed heavy on her heart. Bailey, her bulldog, waddled beside her, his stubby legs carrying him at a pace that mirrored her own. Today, though, something felt off. She'd sensed it the moment she rose from bed, but she brushed it off as an old woman's intuition. She fixed Bailey's breakfast, pouring the same premium food she'd always used, and set it down in his special bowl, blue ceramic with paw prints that Samuel had picked out years ago, saying, "A good bowl for a good boy." Usually, Bailey would be all over it, practically inhaling his breakfast, but today he just looked up at her, his eyes clouded, tail barely wagging. Rose tried calling to him, her voice soft, a little worried. "Bailey, baby, come eat. Don't scare Mama like that." Bailey shifted but didn't approach the bowl. His gaze stayed fixed on her, and Rose's heart tightened. She knelt beside him, rubbing his head as she whispered, "Don't you go doing this to me now. I'm all alone here and I need you." When he didn't respond, her unease grew into something sharper, more urgent. Rose carefully bundled him into her old car and started toward the clinic she'd found online, hoping they'd find a quick fix to whatever was bothering her friend. Little did she know, this trip would change everything. The clinic, Greenwood Veterinary Center, looked as clean and polished as its website promised. Rose took that as a good sign, though a faint flicker of discomfort lingered. She reminded herself that Bailey's health was the priority. At the reception desk, Rose met Tina, a kind young woman with warm eyes. "You must be Mrs. Harper," Tina said, noticing her anxiety. Rose nodded, keeping a protective hand on Bailey's head. "Yes, ma'am. He hasn't been himself today. I don't know what it is, but I'm worried." Tina's reassuring smile eased Rose's tension. "Dr. Adams is excellent, Ms. Harper. Bailey will be in good hands." Dr. Blake Adams, the head veterinarian, stepped out just then, his tall figure framed in the door of the examination room. He had a professional demeanor that verged on distant, but his reputation preceded him. Everyone in the community seemed to think highly of him. He smiled at Rose, though his expression didn't reach his eyes. "Mrs. Harper, you can wait here while I examine Bailey. It shouldn't take long." Rose hesitated, wanting to stay close to Bailey. "He's a little nervous around strangers. Can I?" "Doctor?" Adams cut her off with a tight smile. "I assure you I'm the professional here, and I need space to work." Reluctantly, Rose let Bailey go, watching as Tina led him into the back. She told herself she was overreacting, but the faint prickling sensation along her neck persisted. Rose tried to distract herself, glancing through outdated magazines in the waiting area. Her mind kept drifting back to Bailey, wondering if he was scared, if he missed her. And then, from the back room, she heard something, a thud, followed by a sharp yelp. Her heart raced, and she looked at Tina, who had turned pale, eyes wide with worry. When their gazes met, Tina offered a shaky smile, but her expression betrayed her. Just then, Dr. Adams emerged, his demeanor perfectly composed. "Bailey's condition is more serious than we thought," he said smoothly. "I'll need to keep him here for a bit." Rose felt a wave of nausea but nodded. "Of course, whatever he needs." "Good." Dr. Adams inclined his head. "You can come back tomorrow to check on him. Rose left the clinic with her heart heavy, feeling as though she was leaving a part of herself behind. Bailey had been her companion through thick and thin, and the idea of him being alone, especially feeling sick, gnawed at her. At home, she found herself unable to relax. She went about her evening routine on autopilot, but her mind stayed in the clinic, replaying the sound of that strange thud and Bailey's yelp. Every instinct told her something was wrong, but she didn't want to jump to conclusions. She barely slept, instead whispering a silent promise to Bailey, "I'll be back for you tomorrow. Just hold on, baby." The next morning, Rose returned to the clinic as soon as it opened. She was greeted by Tina, who looked tired and tense, but still tried to offer a comforting smile. Dr. Adams soon emerged from the back, his expression as composed as ever. "Mrs. Harper," he began, his voice calm and even. "Bailey's condition is more complicated than we anticipated. I'm afraid he's not responding well to treatment." Rose's chest tightened, and she clutched her handbag to keep her hands steady. "Can I see him?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Adams shook his head with a faint sigh, as if trying to maintain a professional distance. "Not yet, Mrs. Harper. He needs rest, and the medication will take time to work. I'll update you tomorrow." Rose didn't know what to say. She felt a desperate need to reach Bailey, but Dr. Adams's authority kept her silent. She left the clinic, a sense of unease blooming into full-fledged dread. Later that day, Rose called her son, Daniel, a lawyer known for his integrity and dedication to justice. Though Rose hadn't wanted to burden him, she couldn't shake her suspicions about Dr. Adams. "Daniel, something's wrong," she began, her voice thick with worry. "Bailey's been in that clinic for 2 days now, and I haven't been able to see him." Daniel's voice softened, understanding his mother's attachment to Bailey. "I'll check into it, Mom. Don't worry, sometimes vets are just busy, but I'll make sure nothing is being overlooked." Rose felt a bit of relief hearing his confidence. She trusted Daniel, and if anyone could find out the truth, it was him. That evening, Rose returned to the clinic, unable to stay away. She waited in the lobby, hoping to hear something, anything, that would ease her worry. Tina came over with a hesitant smile, but Rose noticed a glint of unease in her eyes. Tina leaned close, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ms. Harper, I just wanted you to know. I'm keeping an eye on Bailey. I promise I'll make sure he's okay." Rose felt a surge of gratitude. "Thank you, Tina. I don't know what I'd do without him." As Tina squeezed her hand, Rose noticed the young woman's expression shift, as if she wanted to say more. But before Rose could press her, Dr. Adams called for Tina from the back, his tone sharp. Tina straightened, nodding at Rose before hurrying off. Rose returned home that night, Tina's unspoken warning stirring something in her heart. She replayed the past 2 days in her mind. The strange sounds from the examination room, Dr. Adams's cold demeanor, Tina's subtle worry. An idea she'd been trying to ignore forced itself to the forefront of her mind. What if Dr. Adams wasn't treating Bailey as well as he claimed? What if he was hurting him? She pushed the thought away, not wanting to believe it. Dr. Adams had a respected reputation in the community. He'd helped countless pets, but the worry gnawed at her, refusing to let go. The next day, Rose returned to the clinic, determined to see Bailey. She waited until the lobby was empty before approaching the reception desk, her voice firmer than usual. "Tina, I need to see my dog," she said, her eyes fixed on the young woman. "I can't just keep waiting like this." Tina hesitated, glancing over her shoulder as if afraid someone would overhear. Finally, she nodded and whispered, "Wait here. I'll see what I can do." A few tense minutes later, Tina returned with Dr. Adams by her side. He looked at Rose, his expression cool, and she knew he had overheard. "Mrs. Harper," he said, his tone controlled, "I assure you that Bailey is receiving the best care, but it would be disruptive to allow visitors in the treatment area." Rose didn't back down. "I just want to know he's okay. Can't I at least see him through the glass?" Dr. Adams paused, a slight irritation flickering across his face, but he masked it quickly. "Very well, Mrs. Harper. A quick look." Dr. Adams led Rose to a small viewing window where she could see into the treatment area. Bailey lay on a table, his breathing shallow, his usually bright eyes dull. Rose's heart shattered at the sight, and she pressed her hand against the glass, whispering, "Oh, Bailey." "Doctor?" Adams turned to her, his voice professional. "He's in a critical stage, Mrs. Harper. The next few hours will be crucial." As she watched Bailey, Rose noticed something unusual. Faint bruises on his front paw, as if he'd been roughly handled. The sight stirred both alarm and rage in her, and she felt a renewed surge of protectiveness for her beloved friend. Unable to ignore her instincts any longer, Rose waited outside the clinic until Tina's shift ended. When the young woman exited, Rose gently intercepted her, speaking in a low, urgent tone. "Tina, I need to know the truth," Rose said, her eyes searching Tina's face. "Is Bailey safe in there?" Tina hesitated, fear flashing across her face. She glanced around, then nodded, pulling Rose aside. "Mrs. Harper, there's something wrong with Dr. Adams. He's not the man people think he is." Rose's breath caught, but she stayed silent, letting Tina continue. "I've seen him do things," Tina whispered, her voice trembling. "Roughly handling animals, giving high doses of sedatives. I think he gets some kind of control out of it." Rose's hand flew to her mouth as she stifled a gasp. The reality of Tina's words weighed heavily on her. She had feared the worst, but hearing it confirmed was like a knife twisting in her heart. "Why didn't you say anything?" Rose's voice shook, half in accusation, half in desperation. Tina looked down, her eyes brimming with guilt. "I was scared. Dr. Adams is powerful, respected. I didn't think anyone would believe me." As Rose walked home that evening, her emotions swung wildly between grief and fury. She could feel Samuel's voice in her mind, urging her to stand up, to fight. She wasn't just an old woman grieving for her dog. She was a mother, a friend, a fighter, and she was done letting Dr. Adams hold that power. She picked up her phone, hands steady, and dialed Daniel's number. As the call connected, she felt a newfound determination rise within her. "Daniel," she said, her voice filled with steel, "we're going to make sure this never happens to anyone else. It's time to take action." Rose arrived home after her conversation with Daniel feeling a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer the grieving pet owner. She was Bailey's voice, and she would speak for him with all the strength she had. The next morning, she sat down with a notebook, carefully listing all the strange details that had troubled her since Bailey first visited Greenwood Veterinary Center. Dr. Adams's dismissive attitude, Tina's hidden fear, the unexplained bruises on Bailey's paw. She knew that every detail would matter if they were going to make a case against him. That afternoon, Daniel visited his mother, a determined expression on his face. He listened attentively as Rose described everything she'd noticed. His gaze darkened with each detail, and by the time she finished, he had already formulated a plan. "We'll start by talking to other pet owners," Daniel said. "If Dr. Adams has done this before, we'll find someone who's willing to speak up." They began their investigation by reaching out to friends, neighbors, and even online groups in the community. Slowly, they started hearing stories. Other pet owners who had brought their animals to Greenwood Veterinary Center only to experience similar, unsettling incidents. Though some had brushed it off as unfortunate mishaps, others had harbored their suspicions but hadn't known how to confront them. A week later, Daniel and Rose sat down to review the responses they'd gathered. They noticed troubling patterns, multiple accounts of pets returning from Dr. Adams with unexplained injuries, prolonged recoveries, or reactions to medications that should have been harmless. One woman described how her cat had returned from a routine checkup limping, which Dr. Adams had explained away as an unfortunate reaction. Another man recounted how his elderly dog had deteriorated rapidly after a visit to the clinic, leading to an unexpected and devastating loss. As they pieced these stories together, Daniel felt his resolve harden. "He's been getting away with this for too long," he said, his voice tight with anger. "We're going to stop him." Rose reached out to Tina again, asking her to meet somewhere safe, away from the clinic. They chose a small cafe where Tina arrived looking nervous but resolute. She had wrestled with her fear long enough, and now, seeing Rose's determination, she was ready to speak up. "Tina," Rose said gently, "we're going to need your help. If we're going to stop him, we'll need someone from the inside. Tina took a deep breath, visibly gathering her courage. I'm in, she replied, her voice firm. I've seen enough. I'll tell you everything I know. With her permission, Daniel recorded Tina's statement. She described how Dr. Adams would handle certain animals with unnecessary force, give them higher than prescribed doses of sedatives, and maintain an air of disdain toward clients he viewed as troublesome. Tina had kept notes, including details about Bailey's last visit, and she handed these to Daniel as further evidence. With Tina's testimony, Rose and Daniel now had the foundation for a case against Dr. Adams. Daniel filed an official complaint with the State Veterinary Board, attaching Tina's notes and the accounts from other pet owners. Meanwhile, Rose and Daniel began carefully documenting everything, preparing for the possibility of legal action. They knew that Dr. Adams would likely deny everything and fight back, but they were undeterred. Word of Rose's complaint reached Dr. Adams quickly. Days later, she received a letter from his attorney, accusing her of defamation and threatening to sue for damages. The letter's language was harsh, designed to intimidate her into silence. Daniel read the letter with a grim expression. "This is a scare tactic," he assured her. "He's trying to make us back down." But the letter only steeled Rose's determination. "He's scared, Daniel," she said. "He knows he's guilty and he thinks he can intimidate me. Well, he's got another thing coming." As the case developed, news of the complaint against Dr. Adams began circulating in the local community. Journalists reached out to Rose, intrigued by the story of an elderly woman fighting for her dog's memory. Rose gave a few careful interviews, sharing Bailey's story and her resolve to protect other animals from suffering. Her words struck a chord with the community, and many people rallied behind her, while others defended Dr. Adams, insisting that his reputation spoke for itself. Despite the mixed reactions, Rose held her head high, unafraid of the backlash. She knew that she was doing the right thing. One day, Rose received a call from Officer Kyle Thompson, a detective with a strong sense of justice and a history of working on cases involving animal abuse. He had heard about Rose's case through local media and wanted to offer his support. Officer Thompson met with Rose and Daniel, explaining that he had the authority to investigate potential malpractice and mistreatment cases. He reviewed their evidence and promised to dig deeper into Dr. Adams's background. "I'll see what I can find," he assured them. "We may have more on him than just Bailey's case." Officer Thompson's investigation soon yielded surprising results. He discovered inconsistencies in Dr. Adams's records, particularly surrounding cases where pets had passed away unexpectedly. Some records appeared to have been altered or edited, and there were several cases where pet owners hadn't been notified of suspicious findings in the autopsy reports. The evidence Officer Thompson gathered suggested that Dr. Adams had been covering up malpractice, manipulating records to protect his reputation. With the new evidence in hand, Daniel arranged for a meeting with Dr. Adams's legal team. Rose joined him, steeling herself for the confrontation. Dr. Adams sat across the table, his expression cold and defiant. Daniel laid out the evidence methodically, citing the testimonies of other pet owners, Tina's statement, and the documents Officer Thompson had uncovered. For the first time, Rose saw a flicker of fear cross Dr. Adams's face. "You can't prove any of this," he said, his voice wavering slightly. "Oh, we will," Daniel replied calmly. "And once this goes public, your reputation won't save you." The next day, Tina filed an official statement with the State Veterinary Board, providing a detailed account of her experiences working under Dr. Adams. Her testimony was a turning point, adding credibility to Rose's case and inspiring other former employees to come forward with their own stories. Tina's courage sparked a chain reaction, and soon more accounts of mistreatment began to surface. Each story was another nail in the coffin of Dr. Adams's reputation, and he realized his position was growing increasingly untenable. With sufficient evidence compiled, Daniel filed a lawsuit against Dr. Adams on Rose's behalf. The case was scheduled for a court hearing, and Rose knew this was her chance to speak up, not only for Bailey but for all the pets who had suffered under Dr. Adams's care. As Rose prepared to take the stand, she felt the weight of the responsibility she carried, but she also felt a quiet strength. She had Bailey's memory to uphold, and with Daniel and Tina by her side, she knew they were going to bring justice to light. This act builds up to the upcoming legal showdown, as Rose finds allies and finally sees Dr. Adams facing accountability for his actions. Her determination to fight for Bailey and stand up for what's right has reached a new high, setting the stage for an emotionally charged climax in The day of the hearing arrived, and Rose, dressed in her best, entered the courthouse with Daniel by her side. The air was tense, and the room buzzed with murmurs as Dr. Adams's supporters filled one side of the gallery, while Rose's allies and community members filled the other. The atmosphere was heavy with anticipation, the weight of the impending battle felt by everyone present. Daniel leaned over and whispered to Rose, "Remember, Mom, you're here for Bailey and everyone else affected. Stay strong." She gave him a reassuring nod, her resolve unbreakable. She wasn't just an elderly woman fighting for her dog. She was a voice for the voiceless. Daniel delivered a powerful opening statement, detailing Dr. Adams's negligence and systematic mistreatment of animals under his care. He painted a vivid picture of Bailey's case, laying the groundwork for the legal arguments and evidence they would present. Dr. Adams's attorney responded with a calm, measured defense, arguing that Bailey's case was a tragic but isolated incident, nothing more than an unfortunate outcome in veterinary care. They portrayed Dr. Adams as a seasoned professional who had served the community honorably for years. Tina was the first witness to testify. She recounted her experience at Greenwood Veterinary Center, describing the harsh methods Dr. Adams used and how he dismissed concerns from pet owners. Her voice wavered at times, but with Rose's steady gaze encouraging her from the audience, she pushed through. When Rose was called to testify, she took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the weight of Bailey's memory in every step. She recounted her experience at the clinic, the dismissive way Dr. Adams had treated her, the strange sounds she'd heard, and the heartbreak of seeing Bailey's lifeless body. Her voice cracked as she spoke of her love for Bailey, how he had been her companion after her husband's passing. The courtroom was silent, her words hanging heavy in the air, leaving a profound impact on everyone. Dr. Adams's attorney attempted to discredit her, suggesting that her grief had clouded her judgment and accusing her of jumping to conclusions. But Rose held her ground, her voice steady. "I know what I saw. I know what I felt. Bailey was more than just a pet to me. He was family." As the trial continued, Dr. Adams's team focused on casting doubt on the testimonies of Rose, Tina, and other witnesses. They called in former clients who praised Dr. Adams's professionalism and the care he provided for their pets. The defense attorney aimed to paint Dr. Adams as a respected figure caught up in a tragic misunderstanding. The strategy was effective, causing some uncertainty in the gallery. For the first time, Rose felt a pang of doubt, wondering if their fight would be enough to convince the court. As the trial neared its end, the defense brought forward a key witness, a former employee who had left the clinic on bad terms. She testified that she'd never witnessed Dr. Adams mistreat animals, and that Tina had allegedly fabricated her claims to get revenge on Dr. Adams after a personal disagreement. The impact was severe. Rose saw some members of the jury exchange skeptical glances, and Daniel's jaw clenched as he realized this new witness might sway the case in Dr. Adams's favor. After court adjourned for the day, Rose felt her spirits sink. She had poured her heart into this fight, yet it seemed like Dr. Adams might walk away unscathed. As she sat in silence, she remembered her husband's words about standing up for justice, even in the face of defeat. Her determination reignited, and she vowed to see this through. The next morning, Tina approached Daniel and Rose with a determined look in her eyes. "I have more evidence," she said, pulling out a small notebook. "I kept a log of every incident I witnessed, every animal Dr. Adams mistreated. I was scared to come forward before, but I can't let him win." The notebook contained detailed accounts of Dr. Adams's actions, each entry marked with dates and names. It was a powerful piece of evidence, one that could sway the jury's view of Dr. Adams's pattern of behavior. Daniel presented the notebook to the court, introducing it as a record of Dr. Adams's malpractice, corroborating Tina's testimony. He called Tina back to the stand, where she read specific entries aloud, recounting incidents where Dr. Adams had used excessive force or disregarded the welfare of his patients. As Tina's testimony unfolded, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Dr. Adams's expression grew darker, and his attorney seemed increasingly uncomfortable. The notebook was undeniable evidence, directly contradicting the image Dr. Adams had tried to project. Dr. Adams was called to the stand for cross-examination. Daniel questioned him about the entries in Tina's notebook, pressing him on each documented incident. Dr. Adams grew visibly tense, his answers evasive, and the jury's perception began to turn against him. In a moment of desperation, Dr. Adams finally snapped, his mask of professionalism slipping. "I know what's best for these animals," he barked. "Sometimes you have to be firm, and people like you don't understand that." His outburst echoed through the courtroom, revealing the underlying disdain that he had hidden behind his polished image. The jury exchanged looks, their sympathy clearly shifting toward Rose and her team. Daniel's closing statement was a heartfelt plea for justice, emphasizing the bond between Rose and Bailey, the betrayal of trust by a respected professional, and the courage it took for Tina and Rose to stand up against cruelty. He urged the jury to see through Dr. Adams's facade and hold him accountable for his actions. Dr. Adams's attorney, now on the defensive, delivered a final argument focused on damage control, attempting to frame the case as a tragic misunderstanding. But the damage had been done. Dr. Adams's own words, along with Tina's detailed records, painted a damning picture. The jury deliberated for hours, the tension in the courtroom thick. Rose clutched Daniel's hand, barely breathing as she waited for the verdict. Finally, the jury returned, and the foreperson read the decision. Dr. Adams was found guilty of malpractice and animal cruelty, his veterinary license revoked. He would also face a fine and probation, with further investigations into his other cases likely. Rose felt a surge of relief and pride. She had done it. Bailey's memory had been honored, and justice had been served. After the verdict, Rose found herself surrounded by supporters, people who had been inspired by her courage. Tina approached her, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for standing by me, Mrs. Harper. I don't know if I could have done it without you." Rose hugged her, feeling a weight lifted from her heart. She'd not only sought justice for Bailey, but she had also brought peace to herself and others affected by Dr. Adams's cruelty. As Rose left the courthouse, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Bailey's memory would live on, not only through her but through every person they'd helped protect. Her fight wasn't just for herself, but for all those who couldn't speak up. She knew Samuel would be proud. She had fought for justice, just as he had always taught her to. This act reaches a powerful emotional climax in the courtroom, with Rose's testimony, Tina's redemption, and Dr. Adams's unmasking. The intensity peaks as the jury returns a guilty verdict, providing a satisfying resolution to Rose's quest for justice. Let me know if this direction aligns with your vision, and I'll complete the story with Act 5, where Rose and the community heal, leaving a legacy that continues beyond Bailey's life. In the weeks following the verdict, Rose was overwhelmed by the support pouring in from neighbors, friends, and strangers who had been touched by her story. She'd become a local hero, a symbol of resilience and the importance of standing up against wrongdoing. One evening, her neighbors organized a gathering to celebrate her victory. People brought food, shared stories, and expressed gratitude for her courage. Rose felt a warm sense of belonging and purpose that she hadn't felt in years. She realized that this wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who had ever loved and lost a pet. Rose decided to create a small memorial for Bailey at her local community center. She and Daniel worked together to set up a plaque with Bailey's name and a small engraving of his likeness, capturing his sweet expression. The plaque read, "In memory of Bailey, whose spirit reminds us all to fight for those who cannot speak." The community center held a small dedication ceremony. People brought flowers, and some shared stories about their own pets. Rose spoke briefly, her voice soft but steady as she recounted how Bailey had brought her comfort during the darkest days of her life. "This is for Bailey," she said, a tear slipping down her cheek. "But it's also for all of us, to remember that love is worth fighting for." After the trial, Tina found the courage to pursue a new path. She left her job at Greenwood Veterinary Center, determined to turn her experience into something positive. Inspired by Rose's strength, she decided to go back to school to study veterinary ethics, hoping to prevent others from experiencing the same suffering she'd witnessed. She visited Rose before leaving, and they shared a heartfelt moment. "I don't know if I would have found my voice without you, Mrs. Harper," Tina said, hugging her tightly. Rose smiled, feeling a surge of pride for the young woman. "You're going to do great things, Tina. Keep making a difference." Life began to settle into a new rhythm for Rose. With the trial behind her and Bailey's memory honored, she felt a renewed sense of peace. Daniel noticed the change in his mother, seeing her slowly return to the woman she had been before Bailey's illness. One afternoon, Daniel visited with a surprise, a small rescue bulldog with soulful eyes and a wagging tail. Rose's heart melted as she looked into the dog's hopeful gaze, feeling an instant connection. "This is Buddy," Daniel said, smiling. "He needed a home, and I thought, maybe you'd like to give him one." Rose knelt down, stroking Buddy's head as he looked up at her with unwavering trust. "Welcome home, Buddy," she whispered, feeling a familiar warmth fill her heart. Rose found joy in giving Buddy a loving home, teaching him tricks, taking him on walks, and spending her days with him by her side. Buddy filled the quiet spaces Bailey had left behind, and Rose found herself healing, her grief transformed into something beautiful and new. She dedicated herself to volunteering at the community center, helping others who had lost pets, and even assisting with animal welfare initiatives. Her journey with Bailey had taught her the importance of speaking up and taking action, and she wanted to continue that legacy. One evening, Rose sat with Buddy on her porch, watching the sunset. Her thoughts drifted to Bailey, and she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that he would always hold a special place in her heart. But now, she also felt a profound gratitude for the journey he had taken her on. Bailey had been more than a companion. He had been a teacher, a guardian, and a friend. Through him, she had found strength she didn't know she possessed, and through her fight for him, she had brought justice and healing to others. As she sat in the twilight with Buddy at her side, she whispered, "Thank you, Bailey. You gave me more than you'll ever know." In the years that followed, Rose and Daniel established a small foundation in Bailey's name, dedicated to providing resources for pet owners and promoting ethical standards in veterinary care. They hosted workshops, offered legal advice to families who faced similar struggles, and funded educational programs on animal welfare. Rose became a mentor to others who sought justice for their pets, using her experience to guide them and give them hope. Tina returned after completing her studies and joined the foundation, her knowledge and passion adding invaluable expertise. Through the foundation, Rose's story spread, inspiring others across the country to speak up for their animals and to never let fear silence them. One bright afternoon, Rose took Buddy to the community center, where a small group of children had gathered for a workshop on pet care. She watched as they eagerly petted Buddy, their laughter filling the air. Rose smiled, knowing that Bailey's legacy was alive in each young heart that learned to love and care for animals. As the workshop ended, Rose and Buddy began their walk home, a feeling of quiet satisfaction in her heart. She had fought for Bailey, honored his memory, and created a lasting change that would help countless animals and their owners. Her journey had come full circle, and as she walked with Buddy at her side, she knew she had done right by Bailey. She had kept her promise. To him, to herself, and to everyone who had ever known the love of a loyal friend.